Sam was not the kind of man who looked for trouble. He was not the kind of man who looked for adventure either. He was just a man who woke up every morning, made his tea, and went to work. He came home tired, ate a simple meal, and went to sleep. That was his life. It was quiet. It was small. And Sam was fine with that. He lived on the 14th floor of a tall building called Greystone Tower. The building stood in the middle of Callum City, a place where humans and many other species lived side by side. There were tall lizard people who ran the markets on the east side. There were small feathered beings who worked in the sky stations above the rooftops. There were heavy stone-skinned creatures who built roads and never seemed to sleep. Callum City was full of life, full of noise, full of strange smells and stranger sounds. But Sam's apartment was quiet. It had one bedroom, one small kitchen, a little sitting room, and a narrow balcony that looked out over the rooftops of the lower buildings below. Sam liked his balcony. Every morning he would stand there with his tea and watch the city wake up. He would listen to the distant sounds of market sellers and sky-rail trains and the low hum of transport ships passing overhead. It was the one part of his day that felt peaceful before the noise of work swallowed him whole. He worked at a supply depot on the south end of the city. He counted cargo, checked delivery records, and made sure the right boxes went to the right places. It was not exciting work. But it paid well enough, and his manager, an old human named Bert, never bothered him as long as the numbers were right. Sam made sure the numbers were always right. He had no family nearby. His mother had passed 2 years ago, and his father had left when Sam was very young. He had a few friends from work, but they had their own families and their own lives. Sam spent most evenings alone. He did not mind it most of the time. But sometimes, in the very quiet moments before sleep, the silence felt a little too heavy. It was on a cold Tuesday morning in early winter when Sam first saw it. He had woken before sunrise, which was unusual for him. Something had pulled him out of sleep, some small sound he could not quite name. He lay still for a moment, listening. Then he heard it again. A soft, thin sound. Almost like a cry, but very small and very tired. He got up, pulled on his old gray jacket, and walked to the balcony door. He opened it slowly and stepped out into the cold morning air. The city below was still mostly dark. The sky was a deep blue with just the faintest edge of light beginning to grow far on the horizon. And there, on the balcony railing, was a creature. It was small. Smaller than Sam expected from the sound it had made. It was curled tightly against the railing post, pressed close as if trying to make itself as small as possible. Its body was a dark color, somewhere between deep gray and a dull green, and its skin had a strange texture, almost like small overlapping scales but very fine and close together. It had 4 thin legs and a tail that wrapped around the railing post. Its head was down and its eyes were closed. It was shivering. Sam stood very still. He did not want to scare it. He had no idea what kind of creature it was. He had seen many strange animals in Callum City over the years. Some people kept exotic pets from other regions. Some creatures wandered in from the wild edges of the city where the old forest still grew. He assumed this was one of those, some kind of unusual stray that had found its way up here looking for shelter. It looked cold. It looked hungry. It looked exhausted. Sam went back inside quietly. He went to his kitchen and opened the cold storage. He had some leftover cooked meat from the night before, a few pieces of plain bread, and some warm broth he had made earlier in the week. He put a small amount of meat and bread on a plate. He poured a little of the warm broth into a shallow bowl. He carried both out to the balcony very carefully and set them down on the floor near the railing, not too close to the creature, just close enough. Then he stepped back and waited. For a long moment nothing happened. The creature did not move. Sam stood quietly near the balcony door, holding his own tea, watching. The cold air moved slowly around him and the city below began to make its first quiet sounds of the morning. Then one small eye opened. It was a remarkable eye. Even in the low light Sam could see that it was not like any animal eye he had seen before. It was a deep amber color, almost golden, and it caught the first gray light of dawn in a way that made it seem to glow very faintly. The eye looked at Sam. Then it looked at the plate. Then it looked at Sam again. Sam did not move. He kept his face calm and his body still. He took a slow sip of his tea. The creature lifted its head. It looked weak. Its thin neck trembled slightly with the effort. But it kept its eyes on Sam and very slowly, very carefully, it unwound its tail from the railing post and lowered itself from the railing down onto the balcony floor. It moved in small careful steps toward the plate. It sniffed the meat once. Then it ate. It ate slowly at first, as if it was not sure the food was safe. Then hunger took over and it ate more quickly, its small head moving up and down. It lapped a little of the broth from the bowl. When it had eaten what was there it sat back and looked up at Sam again. Sam went inside. He found an old cloth he used for cleaning, a soft worn thing that had been washed many times and was now very comfortable. He brought it out and laid it gently in the corner of the balcony near the wall, where the wind did not reach. He stepped back again and waited. The creature watched him. Then it walked over to the cloth, turned around once, and lay down. It pulled its tail close around its body and put its head down. Within a few minutes it was still. Sam stood there a little longer, looking at it. It was such a small thing. Strange looking, yes. Unusual, certainly. But it was just a cold and hungry creature that had found a high ledge on a cold night and had nowhere else to go. He went inside. He refilled his tea. He stood at the balcony door and watched the city brighten slowly as the sun came up. The creature slept in the corner, very still, breathing in small even breaths. Sam had no idea what it was. He had no idea where it came from. He did not know its name or its kind or why it had chosen his balcony out of all the balconies in all the tall buildings in Callum City. He just knew it had been cold. And now it was warm. That was enough for Sam. The next morning Sam woke up early again. He was not sure why. He just opened his eyes before the sun came up and lay still for a moment, listening. The apartment was quiet. The city outside was quiet. But something made him get up and walk to the balcony door. He opened it slowly and looked out. The creature was back. It was sitting in the same corner, on the same old cloth Sam had left out the night before. It had its tail wrapped around itself and its small head turned toward the door. When Sam stepped out it did not run. It just watched him with those strange amber eyes, calm and steady. Sam let out a slow breath. He had not realized until that moment that he had been hoping it would come back. He went to the kitchen and made his tea. He put together a small plate of food, some pieces of cooked meat and a bit of bread, same as before. He carried it out and set it down near the corner. The creature came forward without hesitation this time and began to eat. Sam stood at the railing with his tea and watched the city below. The sky was still dark at the edges but growing lighter in the middle. A skyrail train moved silently across the far end of the city, its lights blinking slowly. A large transport ship floated low over the rooftops, heading toward the cargo district. Callum City was waking up. He looked down at the creature. It had finished eating and was now sitting very still, watching him. Sam said, without really thinking about it, "Good morning." The creature blinked once. Sam almost smiled. He pulled his jacket tighter against the cold and sipped his tea. That was the beginning of something, though Sam did not know it yet. The days passed. 1 became 3. 3 became 7. 7 became 2 weeks. And every single morning without fail, the creature was there on the balcony when Sam opened the door. Sometimes it arrived before he woke up. Sometimes it arrived just as he was stepping outside. But it was always there. Sam began preparing its food the night before so it would be ready in the morning. He bought a small proper bowl from the market near his depot, a simple gray one that felt sturdy and clean. He began buying better cuts of meat, nothing expensive, just proper food rather than leftovers. He noticed the creature ate well but never too much. It was always neat. It never made a mess. It ate what was there and then sat quietly and waited. Waited for what, Sam was not entirely sure. But he liked to think it was waiting for his company. He started talking to it. It began small. Just simple things he said out loud while standing at the railing with his tea. He would say things like, "Cold morning today," or, "The sky looks strange this color." The creature would sit and listen. It never made a sound in response. But it always looked at him directly when he spoke, as if it understood that words were being offered and it was respectful enough to receive them properly. Sam named it Ash. He chose the name because of the color of its scales in the early morning light. They were a deep gray-green most of the time, but in that first pale light of dawn they looked soft and ash-colored, like the remains of a fire that had burned quietly through the night. It felt like the right name. Simple and easy and honest. He called it Ash out loud one morning while setting down the food bowl. He said, "Here you go, Ash, good morning." And the creature looked up at him with those amber eyes and something in its expression shifted, just slightly. Sam could not have explained what changed. But something did. After that he used the name every morning. The neighbors began to notice. An older lizard-kind woman named Sel who lived 2 floors below and had a balcony that faced the same direction saw Ash sitting on Sam's railing one afternoon. She called up to Sam and asked what that creature was. Sam said he was not entirely sure, probably some kind of exotic stray. Sel looked at Ash for a long moment with an expression Sam could not read. Then she told him to be careful with strays in this city because not everything that looked small was actually small. Sam thanked her and thought nothing more of it. A young feathered man named Pip who worked at the sky station and sometimes shared Sam's morning Skyrail ride asked Sam one day if he had heard about unusual sightings in the upper districts of the city. Pip said there were rumors of something large moving in the clouds above Callum City at night. Very large. Sam said he had not heard anything and changed the subject to cargo schedules because that was easier. He did not connect any of it to Ash. How could he? Ash was small. Ash was quiet. Ash sat in a corner on an old cloth and ate plain food from a gray bowl and watched Sam with calm golden eyes every morning. There was nothing about Ash that suggested anything large or serious or important. Except for the eyes. Sam noticed the eyes properly for the first time about 3 weeks in. He had come home from a long shift at the depot, later than usual, and the sky outside was fully dark by the time he got back. He had not expected Ash to be there at that hour. But when he stepped out onto the balcony to get some air before bed, Ash was sitting in the corner, still and quiet as always. And the eyes were glowing. Not brightly. Not in a way that lit up the balcony or threw light onto the walls. Just a soft deep amber glow, very faint, like a coal that had almost gone out but still held heat somewhere deep inside. Sam stood in the doorway and looked at it for a moment. He thought about it for a few seconds. He considered the possibilities in a calm and practical way. He had seen animals with reflective eyes before, the kind that caught light and threw it back. He told himself this was something like that. Some kind of unusual eye structure that gathered the ambient light of the city below and reflected it back in that warm color. He went inside, got a small plate of food, brought it out, and set it down for Ash. Ash ate. The glow faded as the night went on. Sam went to bed. He did not think about it again. Not seriously. He was not the kind of man who looked for mysteries in small things. He was the kind of man who saw a cold creature on a balcony and brought it a bowl of food. That was the full extent of how Sam's mind worked in moments like this. Simple. Practical. Kind. But Ash watched him go inside that night and sat very still in the dark long after Sam had turned off his light. And the glow in those amber eyes did not fade as quickly as Sam had thought. It burned on quietly in the cold night air, steady and deep, like something very old keeping watch over something it had decided to trust. The city hummed below. The stars were hidden behind clouds. And on the 14th floor of Greystone Tower, a small creature that Sam called Ash curled on an old cloth and slept, safe and warm and fed. And far above the city, so high that no one looked up far enough to see, something enormous moved slowly through the dark clouds and did not leave. It was a Thursday evening when the knock came. Sam had just finished his dinner. He had made a simple soup with bread on the side, the kind of meal he made when he was tired and did not want to think too much about cooking. Ash was inside that evening, which had become normal over the past week. The temperature had dropped sharply in the city and Sam had started leaving the balcony door open just a little so Ash could come in if the cold became too much. Ash had started using that gap more and more until one evening Sam had come home to find Ash curled up in the old reading chair in the corner of the sitting room as if it had always belonged there. Sam had looked at the chair. He had looked at Ash. Then he had gone to the kitchen to make his dinner. The chair was Ash's chair now. That was simply how it was. So on that Thursday evening Ash was in the chair, curled in a neat circle with its tail wrapped around its body and its eyes half closed, watching Sam clean up after dinner. The lamp in the corner was on and the room was warm. It was a quiet and comfortable evening. The kind Sam liked best. Then the knock came. It was not a soft knock. It was not the kind of knock a neighbor made when they wanted to borrow something. It was a heavy knock, slow and deliberate, the kind that suggested whoever was on the other side of the door was very large and very certain that someone would answer. Sam dried his hands on a cloth and walked to the door. He opened it. There were 3 of them. They were tall. Taller than any human Sam had ever stood next to, taller than most species he had seen in Callum City. They wore long robes of deep red and dark gold, heavy fabric that moved slowly even in the still air of the corridor. Their faces were partly hidden beneath wide hoods but Sam could see enough. Their skin was a dark bronze color and their eyes were sharp and gold, bright as coins in lamplight. Their hands, where they showed at the edges of their sleeves, were long-fingered and had a faint texture to them, scaled and dry and very still. They were not human. Sam had understood that in the first half-second. The one in the middle was slightly taller than the others. It looked at Sam with an expression that was entirely unreadable. Then it spoke. Its voice was low and careful, like someone who had learned to make a very large sound very small on purpose. It said, "We are looking for something that belongs to the sovereign. We have reason to believe it is here." Sam looked at the 3 of them. He looked at the robes. He looked at the gold eyes. He thought for a moment and then he stepped to the side and said, "You had better come in then." The 3 figures looked at each other. Then they stepped inside. They filled the sitting room in a way that made it feel much smaller than it was. They stood close together near the doorway, their robes brushing the ceiling slightly, their gold eyes moving slowly around the room. Sam stood near the kitchen doorway with his hands in his pockets and waited. Then the one in the middle saw Ash. Everything changed in that moment. The 3 figures went completely still. The one in the middle made a very small sound, barely a breath, something between a word and a gasp. All 3 pairs of gold eyes locked onto the chair in the corner where Ash was sitting, now fully awake, amber eyes open and calm, watching the visitors without any sign of fear. The middle figure took one slow step forward. Then it stopped. It turned to Sam and its voice, when it came, was very carefully controlled. It said, "Do you know what this creature is?" Sam said he had always thought it was some kind of exotic stray. He said he found it on his balcony about a month ago, cold and hungry. He said he had been feeding it since then. The middle figure was quiet for a long moment. Then it said, "This is not a stray. This creature is Soren. It is the only hatchling of the dragon sovereign. It has been missing for 3 months. Every search party in the northern region has been looking. The sovereign has not slept since the night Soren disappeared." Sam looked at the figure. Then he looked at Ash. Ash looked back at him with those steady amber eyes and did not move from the chair. Sam was quiet for a moment. He turned the information over in his mind the way he turned over cargo numbers at the depot, carefully, making sure he had understood correctly before saying anything. Then he said, "Has it been eating enough?" The 3 figures stared at him. Sam said it again, more clearly this time. He said, "Soren, has the hatchling been eating enough?" He said he had been giving it meat and broth every morning and sometimes in the evenings too, but he was not sure if that was the right diet for its kind. He said he had been doing his best but he was not an expert and if there was something specific it needed he wanted to know so he could have been providing it properly. The silence in the room was very complete. The figure on the left turned to look at the figure on the right. The figure on the right looked back. Neither of them seemed to have any words ready. The middle figure kept its gold eyes on Sam and something moved behind that unreadable expression, something that was not quite surprise because surprise was too simple a word for it. Sam crossed the room and sat down on the edge of the low table near the chair. Ash immediately moved, shifting from a curled position to an upright one, and pressed its small head gently against Sam's arm. Sam put his hand on Ash's back the way he always did in the evenings. Ash was warm beneath his palm, warmer than any ordinary animal, and the faint amber glow was beginning to build very softly in those eyes the way it always did when the light in the room went dim. Sam looked up at the 3 figures and asked if they wanted to sit down. None of them sat. The middle figure finally found its words. It said, "You have been caring for the sovereign's only hatchling for 1 month, in your home, without knowing what it was." Sam said that was correct. The figure said, "And your first question is whether it has been eating properly." Sam said yes because that seemed like the most important thing. He said he could worry about everything else after he knew Ash, Soren, was healthy. The figure looked at him for a long time. Then it looked at Soren, pressed calmly against Sam's side, warm and fed and completely unbothered by the presence of 3 robed figures from the sovereign's court standing in a small human apartment on the 14th floor of Greystone Tower. Soren let out a low slow sound, barely audible, deep in its chest. Sam had heard that sound before. It was the sound Ash made when it was comfortable. When it was content. The middle figure looked at that, and then looked back at Sam, and said nothing at all. The message came the following morning. The middle figure, whose name Sam had learned was Reld, had told him the night before that the sovereign would be informed immediately. Reld had said it in a calm and formal voice but his gold eyes had been moving quickly, the way eyes move when the person behind them is working very hard to stay composed. The 3 figures had left shortly after, moving back down the corridor in their heavy robes with a quietness that did not match their size. Sam had closed the door, looked at Ash, and said, "Well, that explains the wings." Ash had looked at him and then gone back to the chair. Sam had gone to bed. He slept reasonably well, which surprised him when he thought about it the next morning. He supposed there was nothing he could do about any of it before sunrise so there was no point lying awake. He made his tea. He fed Ash. He stood on the balcony and watched the city wake up, same as always. Then at mid-morning Reld came back. Alone this time, without the other 2. He stood in Sam's doorway and said, in that same careful controlled voice, that the sovereign was coming. He said it the way someone might say a very large and unstoppable thing is on its way and there is nothing to be done about that now. Sam asked when. Reld said, "This afternoon." He said, "You should know that when the sovereign lands in a city the size of Callum, it causes a certain reaction among the population." He paused and then added, "A significant reaction." Sam asked if he needed to do anything to prepare. Reld looked at him for a moment and then said, most beings prepare by leaving the area entirely. Sam said he understood and thanked Reld for the information. Reld left. Sam washed the breakfast bowls and put them away neatly. The reaction began just after midday. Sam heard it first as a change in the sound of the city. Callum City was always loud, always moving, always filling the air with its particular mixture of noise. But that afternoon the noise changed. It did not stop, not all at once, but it shifted. The market sounds thinned out. The Skyrail trains slowed. The hum of transport ships faded as they moved quickly to the far edges of the flight paths. And then, spreading through the streets and buildings like water moving through cracks, came a different sound. A low sound. A sound that was not quite a sound but more like a feeling in the chest. A pressure that had no name. Sam stepped onto his balcony and looked up. It was coming from the north. He could see it as a shape first, far away and high up, moving through the clouds with a slowness that was more frightening than speed because something that large should not have been able to move that smoothly. It was dark against the pale afternoon sky, enormous, with a wingspan that Sam's mind struggled to measure properly because there was nothing nearby to compare it to. As it came closer the pressure in the air grew heavier and the city below went quieter and quieter until by the time the shape was directly above Greystone Tower the streets were almost completely silent. Sam had never heard Callum City silent before. The Sovereign landed on the roof. Sam felt it through the floor of his apartment. A deep and solid impact, not violent, just immense, like the building had taken a slow breath and held it. Then everything was still. Ash was sitting on the table near the balcony door. Its amber eyes were fully glowing now, bright and deep, and it was sitting very straight, more straight than Sam had ever seen it sit. It looked like a different creature in that moment. Not smaller. Just more itself than it had ever appeared before. Sam looked at Ash. He said, "I am going up to the roof." Ash looked at him. Sam said, "Do you want to come?" Ash stepped off the table and walked to the front door and waited. Sam put on his jacket. He picked up the small cloth from the chair, the old worn one that Ash had always slept on, because his hands wanted something to hold and it was the thing closest to him. Then he opened the door and they went to the stairwell together, Sam walking and Ash moving alongside him in that quiet careful way it always moved. The roof access door was already open. The cold afternoon air came down the stairwell and Sam climbed toward it slowly, one step at a time. He came out onto the roof and stopped. The Sovereign was there. There were no words Sam knew that were large enough for what was standing on the roof of Greystone Tower. It was a dragon in the way that the sky was simply sky, completely itself, completely beyond argument. Its scales were a deep and ancient bronze, darker in some places and catching cold light in others. Its head was low and level, resting on a long neck that curved with a kind of heavy grace. Its eyes were open and they were gold, the same gold as Reld's eyes and the other attendants, but larger and older and so steady that looking into them felt like looking into something that had been watching the world for longer than most things had existed in it. The Sovereign looked at Sam. Sam walked forward. He was aware that his heart was beating faster than usual. He was aware that his legs felt strange and his mouth was dry. But he kept walking because turning around did not feel like the right thing to do and Sam had always been someone who did the thing that felt right even when it was uncomfortable. He stopped a reasonable distance away. He bowed. Not a small polite nod but a proper bow, slow and low, the kind that meant he understood completely who he was standing in front of. Then he straightened and he said, "I am glad Soren was found safe. I am glad the hatchling is going home." His voice was steady. He was proud of that. The Sovereign was still for a long moment. Those ancient gold eyes moved over Sam slowly, the way deep water moves, unhurried and thorough. Sam did not look away. He did not step back. He stood with his old cloth in his hands and his jacket against the cold and he met those eyes as honestly as he knew how. He had no fear to hide because he had already decided on the stairs that being afraid was not useful here. He had no request to make because he had not done any of this for a reward, and starting to want one now seemed wrong. He had nothing to offer and nothing to ask for. He was just Sam, from the 14th floor, who had fed a cold creature on a winter morning because it had been hungry. The Sovereign saw all of that. Sam did not know how he knew that, but he knew. Ash moved from beside Sam's feet and walked forward toward the Sovereign. The great head lowered slowly and Ash pressed against it, small and warm and completely calm. The Sovereign made a sound then, very low, felt more in the bones than heard with the ears, something that had no translation but needed none. Then those ancient eyes came back to Sam. And stayed there. The wind on the roof was cold and steady. Sam stood still and waited. He did not know what came next. He had never stood on a rooftop in front of a dragon sovereign before, and there was no part of his life that had prepared him for what the correct next step was. So he did what he always did when he did not know what to do. He stood quietly and waited for things to become clear. The Sovereign looked at him for a long time. Those ancient gold eyes did not blink. They did not move away. They simply stayed on Sam with a weight that was not threatening but was very serious, the way the eyes of someone very wise are serious when they are deciding something important. Sam held the old cloth in his hands and waited. Then the Sovereign moved. The great head came down. Not fast. Not suddenly. It came down slowly and with complete intention, lowering from its full height in a long smooth movement until it was level with Sam, and then lower still, until the Sovereign's head was bowed toward him, that enormous bronze forehead angled down in a gesture that was unmistakable in any language spoken by any species in any part of the world. It was a bow. Sam heard something behind him. He glanced back briefly and saw Reld and the two other attendants standing near the roof access door. All three of them had gone completely still. Reld's gold eyes were wide, which was the first time Sam had seen anything close to open surprise on that careful face. The other two looked at each other and then back at the Sovereign and then at Sam, and none of them made a single sound. Sam turned back to the Sovereign. He bowed again himself, lower than before, and held it for a moment before straightening. It felt like the right response. It felt like the only response that made sense. The Sovereign lifted its head slowly. Then Reld came forward. His steps were careful and deliberate, and when he reached Sam's side he stood very straight and spoke in a voice that was formal and clear, the kind of voice used when words are being said for the record and not just for the moment. He said, "By the act of the Sovereign, witnessed here on this day, the human known as Sam is granted the title of Warden of the Hatchling." He said the title meant one who protected royal blood without being asked, without payment, and without condition. He said it was a title that had existed in dragon law for a very long time but had never been given to a human before. He said it carried with it the recognition of the Sovereign and the protection of the dragon nation, extended to Sam, his home, and everything within his care. Sam listened to all of this. When Reld finished he said, "Thank you." He said it simply and meant it completely. Reld nodded once. Then he stepped back. Ash was still beside the Sovereign, small against that enormous bronze head. But after a moment Ash turned and walked back across the roof to Sam and sat down beside his feet. Sam looked down at Ash. Ash looked up at him with those amber eyes, glowing softly in the cold afternoon light. Sam reached down and put his hand gently on Ash's head the way he always did. The Sovereign watched that. And then, for just a moment, something in those ancient gold eyes changed. It was not a small change. But it was a quiet one. The kind of change that happens when something that has been afraid for a very long time finally stops being afraid. Sam did not see it clearly. But Reld did. And Reld would think about it for a long time afterward. The Sovereign spread its great wings slowly. The sound of it was like deep thunder heard from far away, a low and rolling pressure that moved across the rooftop and down into the streets below. Sam felt it in his chest. He did not step back. He watched as the sovereign rose, lifting from the roof in one long powerful movement, ascending into the cold afternoon sky with a grace that had no right to exist in something so large. It circled once above Greystone Tower. Then it rose higher and disappeared into the clouds. The city below was still quiet for another few minutes. Then slowly, gradually, Callum City began to find its voice again. The market sounds returned. The sky rail trains started moving. The hum of transport ships came back from the edges of the flight paths. Life resumed the way life always does, carefully at first and then all at once. Sam stood on the roof until the cold became too much. Then he picked up Ash and carried it down the stairs and back into the apartment. He set Ash down on the chair. He went to the kitchen and made tea. He stood at the balcony door and looked out at the city and drank it slowly. It was a strange day, he thought. A very strange day indeed. But the tea was good. The days that followed were different in ways that were hard to explain but easy to feel. Reld came by twice in the first week to check that Sam had everything he needed and to ask if there were any concerns. Sam said everything was fine and offered tea both times. Reld accepted both times, which surprised Sam a little, and they sat at the small kitchen table and talked quietly about simple things. Reld was not as unreadable as Sam had first thought. He was just careful. Sam understood careful people. He was one himself. The neighbors noticed changes too. Sel from 2 floors below stopped Sam in the corridor one morning and told him that 3 large bronze-scaled figures had been standing at the base of Greystone Tower the night before, still as statues, watching the building. She said it in the tone of someone reporting a very serious thing. Sam thanked her and said he thought it was fine. Sel looked at him for a long moment and then nodded slowly as if she had decided to simply accept that Sam was a different kind of person than she had previously understood. Ash still came to the balcony every morning. That was the thing that did not change. That was the thing that stayed exactly as it had always been. Every morning before sunrise Sam would open the balcony door and Ash would be there, either already curled on the old cloth in the corner or arriving quietly just as Sam stepped out with his tea. They would sit together in the cold morning air and watch the city wake up. Sam would talk about small things, his work, the weather, something he had read the night before. Ash would listen with those calm amber eyes and sometimes press close against Sam's side when the wind came in sharp from the north. It was the same as it had always been. Except that now, if Sam looked up far enough into the early morning sky, he could sometimes see it. A shape, very high, moving slowly above the clouds above Callum City. Too large and too steady to be a transport ship. Too quiet and too patient to be anything other than what it was. The Sovereign. Circling. Watching. Sam would look up at that great slow shape and then look back down at Ash beside him on the old worn cloth, and he would take a slow sip of his tea and feel something he had not felt in a very long time. Not since his mother was alive. Not since the apartment had another voice in it. He felt like someone was watching over him. And high above the city, in the cold and quiet sky, the Sovereign circled on.